Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. I need you to understand something before I begin. I've spent 12 years pulling people out of the worst situations the Blue Ridge Mountains could throw at them. Broken legs, missing hikers, avalanches, lightning strikes. Hell, I've zipped up body bags more times than I care to remember. I thought I understood disaster. I thought I knew what fear looked like. My name's Oliver. Nothing prepared me for that. The morning started normal enough. I was grabbing coffee at the station when dispatch supervisor Margaret called us in early. She looked frazzled, which was unusual for her. Margaret had been coordinating rescues for 20 years and nothing rattled her. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and she kept checking her phone every few seconds like she was expecting bad news. "We've got a backlog of calls," she said, shuffling through paperwork with shaking hands. Her coffee mug sat untouched, steam still rising. Richmond's had some kind of incident at the medical district. They're requesting our team stay in regional zones only today. I exchanged glances with my partner Jake. In 12 years, I'd never heard of regional restrictions like that. "What kind of incident?" Jake asked, setting down his gear bag. "Chemical leak?" "Maybe. Details are sketchy. CDC's involved somehow." She paused, rubbing her temples like she had a migraine. "Point is, we're handling everything west of Charlottesville today. And Oliver, keep your radio channels clear. Emergency services are reporting unusual communication traffic." At the time, I figured it was just another bureaucratic mess. Hospital evacuations weren't uncommon after chemical spills. But there was something in Margaret's voice, a tension I'd never heard before. She'd coordinated responses to plane crashes, multi-car accidents, even a terrorist threat once. This was different. The call came in at 3:47 p.m. 2 hikers on the Old Rag Mountain Trail, one with a compound fracture. The other showing signs of severe dehydration and shock. Standard rescue operation. But the dispatcher sounded stressed, speaking faster than usual. "Last known position is approximately 2 miles up the ridge trail," she said. "Caller reported seeing emergency alert messages on their phones before losing signal. Might be related to the Richmond situation." Emergency alerts? That was new. I'd been doing this long enough to know hikers usually called 911, not emergency broadcast systems. Jake and I suited up while pilot Benedict prepped the helicopter. Our gear check took longer than usual. Something felt off about the whole day. We loaded medical packs, trauma supplies, IV fluids, splinting materials, and extra communication equipment. "You hear anything weird on the radio this morning?" Jake asked as we secured the equipment. He'd been quieter than usual all day. "Margaret seemed spooked, and she doesn't spook easily. Probably just Richmond overreacting to something," I replied. But I'd noticed it too. The usual chatter between emergency services had been replaced by terse, clipped communications. No jokes, no casual conversation, just professional exchanges with an edge of anxiety. "Weather's turning ugly," Benedict called over the rotor wash as he completed his pre-flight check. "Front moving in from the west. We'll have maybe 2 hours before this gets nasty. Wind's already picking up. I can feel it affecting the controls." As we lifted off, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. The normally busy emergency medical helicopter pad at UVA was completely empty. No air traffic at all. In 12 years, I'd never seen it deserted during daylight hours. Usually there were at least 2 or 3 choppers either landing, taking off, or prepping for flights. "Where is everyone?" I shouted to Benedict over the engine noise. He shrugged, but I caught him checking his radio frequencies more often than usual. "Been quiet all day. Weird for a Tuesday. Usually we're dodging traffic up here." The flight out was routine in some ways, terrifying in others. October in the Appalachians is spectacular. Endless waves of orange and red foliage broken only by granite ridges and serpentine hiking trails. But something felt wrong with the world below us. Interstate 64 showed unusual traffic patterns. Long convoys of vehicles heading west, away from Richmond. some abandoned cars on the shoulder with doors hanging open. I could see people gathered around their vehicles, some looking up at us and waving frantically, others just standing there like they didn't know where to go. Benedict pointed it out too. "Looks like people are leaving the city in a hurry," he said through the headset. "That's not normal for afternoon traffic. And look, some of those cars just stopped in the middle of the road." We spotted the signal mirror flash about 18 minutes out, near the summit approach where the terrain gets technical. The reflection was weak and intermittent. Whoever was signaling was either injured or exhausted. Landing zone was tight. The closest Benedict could get us was a rocky clearing roughly 400 yards from the casualties. The wind was picking up, making the approach tricky. Tree branches whipped around us as we descended, and I could feel the helicopter fighting the gusts. "I'll keep the engine running," Benedict shouted over the noise. "This wind's only getting worse, and I don't like what I'm hearing on the radio." Jake and I grabbed our gear, 2 medical packs, trauma kit, portable stretcher, IV supplies, and emergency bivouac equipment. The packs felt heavier than usual, loaded with extra supplies Margaret had insisted we carry. We pushed through dense undergrowth, following GPS coordinates, and increasingly desperate shouts from the injured party. The terrain was rough, all loose rocks and steep inclines that made carrying equipment difficult. "Help over here, please." The voice was female, hoarse from shouting. We found them sheltered against a massive boulder formation, a man in his 50s with his right tibia snapped clean through, bone fragments visible through shredded flesh and torn hiking pants. The break was ugly, compound fracture with obvious displacement. Blood had soaked through an improvised bandage made from a torn shirt. His companion, a woman named Lisa, was conscious but showing clear signs of shock and dehydration. Her lips were cracked, skin pale and clammy. She'd been crying. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt. Her hands shook as she pointed to her injured friend. "Thank God you're here," she sobbed as I knelt beside her. "We've been here since this morning. Angel fell trying to help me up a rock face. We were just doing a day hike." I started my assessment protocol. Lisa's pulse was rapid but strong. Blood pressure slightly low but stable. Dehydrated but not critical. "When did the accident happen exactly?" I asked, starting IV access. "Around 10 this morning," she said, wincing as the needle went in. "We tried calling for help, but our phones, they kept getting these weird alerts. Emergency broadcasts about staying indoors. We thought it was a test." I felt my stomach tighten. Emergency broadcasts while hiking? What exactly did the alerts say? Something about avoiding public gatherings. Shelter-in-place orders. Some kind of health emergency. She grabbed my arm. "We didn't understand it. We were just hiking. My children are expecting me for dinner. Tommy has soccer practice at 7. I need to get home." Jake was already working on Angel, checking pupils, pulse, blood pressure. The man was barely conscious, going deeper into shock by the minute. His breathing was shallow and rapid. "Oliver, this is bad," Jake said quietly, applying pressure to control bleeding. "Compound fracture, probable internal bleeding. He's lost a lot of blood. Pulse is thready at 1/10, BP dropping to 90/60. I moved to Angel after establishing Lisa's IV. His skin was cold and clammy, pulse weak and rapid. Blood pressure was dangerously low. The bone fragments were still visible through torn muscle and skin. He needed surgical intervention within hours, or he wouldn't survive. "Angel, can you hear me?" I called to the injured man. He responded with a weak groan. Pupils were equal and reactive, but he was sliding fast into hypovolemic shock. "Did you hear any of those emergency broadcasts?" I asked Jake quietly as we worked to stabilize Angel's leg with an inflatable splint. He nodded while checking the man's airway. "Caught fragments this morning. Something about avoiding public gatherings. Figured it was another COVID thing. But Margaret seemed really spooked about it. The splinting process was delicate. We had to immobilize the fracture without cutting off circulation." Angel groaned weakly as we positioned the inflatable splint around his leg. That's when we encountered our first real complication. The helicopter's weight capacity with our full medical kit meant we could only transport 3 people safely. Angel required immediate evacuation. He was critical and deteriorating. Lisa was stable enough to wait for the return trip. "I'll stay with her," I told Jake as we secured Angel to the backboard and started the difficult carry back to the landing zone. "Get him to University of Virginia Medical Center. Standard protocol, come back for us within 90 minutes. We had to move carefully through the underbrush, trying not to jar Angel's injuries. Lisa walked beside us despite her weakness, asking questions I couldn't answer. Jake hesitated when we reached the helicopter, scanning the darkening sky where storm clouds gathered like bruises. "You certain about this? Weather's deteriorating fast. Could be a rough ride back. And with all the weird stuff on the radio today, I've done this dozens of times. She's stable, just needs continued fluids and warmth. Besides, someone needs to stay with her." We loaded Angel into the helicopter, securing the stretcher and connecting him to the onboard monitors. His vitals were getting worse, pulse weaker, blood pressure dropping further. Benedict was waiting with the rotors turning, obviously anxious about the weather. "Back before you know it, Oliver," he called. But I noticed he was fidgeting with his radio more than usual. "Keep that radio handy. Might get choppy with this weather rolling in. And hey, if you pick up any of those emergency broadcasts, let me know what they're saying." I watched the helicopter lift off, rotors beating against the mountain air until the sound faded completely over the ridge. The silence that followed felt oppressive somehow. Too complete, too heavy. Even the usual mountain sounds seemed muted. Wind whistled through the pines, but there were no bird calls, no small animal movements. Lisa trembled beside me despite the October warmth still radiating from sun-heated rocks. "When will they return?" she asked, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "Those emergency messages. They said something about not traveling after dark." "Soon. Let's get you comfortable and warmed up." I established our emergency bivouac between two protective boulders, wrapped Lisa in thermal blankets, and checked her vitals again. Pulse was stronger at 88, blood pressure stabilizing at 110/70. I adjusted the IV drip and made sure she was warm. The wind was picking up, making our shelter feel less secure. I checked my watch, 4:23 p.m. Still plenty of daylight, but that storm was coming fast. Then I attempted radio contact with base. Nothing but static on our primary rescue frequency. Mountain communications were always spotty. Nothing unusual there. The granite peaks and deep valleys played hell with radio waves. I switched to emergency services channels. That's when I intercepted the first transmission that made my blood freeze. Richmond General reporting multiple casualties, requesting immediate backup, patients displaying extreme aggressive behavior, multiple staff injuries, some kind of mass psychotic episode. The signal dissolved into static. I adjusted the antenna, searching for clearer reception. More fragments emerged through the electronic snow. Norfolk Naval Station implementing lockdown procedures. CDC has been contacted. Unknown pathogen suspected. All units avoid downtown areas. Civilian population advised to shelter immediately. Do not approach symptomatic individuals. Reports of similar incidents in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, coordinated response being implemented. I rationalized it as probably a chemical leak or terrorist attack. Maybe contaminated water supply causing mass hysteria. Nothing that would impact our extraction. But as minutes crawled past, the radio chatter became increasingly frantic and disjointed. 5:15 p.m. Virginia State Police requesting National Guard deployment. Hospitals completely overwhelmed. Medical staff evacuating. Repeat, medical staff evacuating. 5:32 p.m. Interstate 95 corridor experiencing massive traffic disruption. Multiple vehicle accidents. Abandoned vehicles blocking roadways. Motorists advised to stay in vehicles. 5:48 p.m. My radio erupted with Jake's voice, barely audible through crushing static. Oliver, can you receive? I'm here. What's your ETA for pickup? Listen very carefully. Do not attempt to reach the hospital. Do not approach any populated areas. The transmission fragmented. I pressed the transmit button hard. Jake, You're breaking up badly. Repeat your message. Angel didn't survive transport. Benedict is people are attacking each other. Biting. Oh God. They're biting. It's not natural. Jake, I can't understand you clearly. Where's Benedict? When are you returning? Extended silence filled with electronic snow. Then Jake's voice, clearer but strained with absolute terror. We're not coming back, Oliver. Benedict turned. He attacked Angel's body, tried to bite me. Had to put him down. Stay in the mountains. Whatever's happening, stay away from people. They're not people anymore. The radio died completely. I stared at the handset, my 12 years of rescue experience warring with complete disbelief. Jake was the most reliable person I knew. Former combat medic, 16 years in emergency response. He didn't abandon missions. He didn't panic. He'd been through 3 deployments in Afghanistan and never lost his cool. What did he tell you? Lisa asked, reading the confusion and growing alarm in my expression. Technical complications. They'll resolve it shortly. Even as I spoke those words, my mind raced through possibilities. The radio transmissions, Jake's obvious terror, mentions of people attacking and biting each other. None of it aligned with any crisis scenario I'd trained for. Biting? What kind of medical emergency involved biting? I attempted contact with dispatch, other rescue teams, state police headquarters. Dead air or busy signals greeted every attempt. The communication infrastructure seemed to be collapsing. 6:22 p.m. A Virginia State Police dispatcher, voice cracking under pressure. All units maintain distance from Richmond metropolitan area. Repeat. Downtown core is compromised. Citizens must shelter in place immediately. Multiple officer casualties reported at VCU Medical Center. Officers are down. Suspects are not responding to commands. They just keep coming. Unit 47 requesting emergency backup. Officer down. Suspects are not responding to verbal commands or physical restraint. They just keep coming. Oh God. They just keep coming. The transmissions grew shorter, more desperate. Whatever was unfolding was spreading rapidly across multiple jurisdictions. I could hear gunfire in the background of some transmissions. 6:45 p.m. brought a burst of military communications. Establishing quarantine perimeter around affected zones. Shoot on-site authorization for infected individuals. Norfolk base reporting perimeter breach. Multiple casualties in Medical Bay. Requesting immediate evacuation. This is Colonel Whitaker. If anyone receives this transmission, avoid all population centers. The infection spreads through bites. Shoot for the head. Only way to stop them, God help us all. Infection. Shoot for the head. The words hung in the mountain air like a death sentence. What kind of infection required headshots to stop? Oliver, Lisa whispered. Her voice small and frightened. Something terrible is happening, isn't it? Those emergency messages this morning, they weren't tests, were they? I looked at this ordinary woman, a mother who'd simply wanted a peaceful day hiking with her friend, and made the decision that probably saved both our lives. Yes, something very bad, but we're safer up here than anywhere down there right now. The temperature was dropping fast as the sun disappeared behind the western peaks. I could see my breath in small puffs. I set up our emergency shelter more thoroughly, knowing we'd be here through the night, maybe longer. As complete darkness engulfed the Appalachian peaks, I unpacked our emergency survival gear and prepared for what I sensed would be the longest night of my existence. The radio continued broadcasting fragments of a collapsing world, and somewhere in the valleys far below us, civilization was dying. We just didn't comprehend the scope of it yet. 7:18 p.m. The last coherent transmission I received that night. This is emergency broadcast system. All previous alerts confirmed. Seek immediate shelter. Avoid contact with infected individuals. Military assistance is no longer available. Repeat. Military assistance is no longer available. May God help us all. Then silence. Complete terrifying silence from the world below. I checked Lisa's vitals one more time. Her condition was stable, but she was asking questions I couldn't answer. About her children, about when we'd get home, about what was really happening down there. I didn't have answers. All I knew was that something had gone catastrophically wrong, and we were trapped on a mountain while the world ended below us. The night was hell. Lisa barely slept, mumbling about her children every time she dozed off. I stayed awake, monitoring the radio and watching her vitals. The IV bag was half empty by midnight. Her condition remained stable, but the psychological stress was taking its toll. At 2:17 a.m., a new sound cut through the mountain silence. Helicopter rotors, distant but growing closer. My heart leaped. Jake had found a way back. "Do you hear that?" Lisa whispered, sitting up in her sleeping bag. I grabbed the radio, switching to aviation frequencies. "Any aircraft in the vicinity of Old Rag Mountain? This is Wilderness Rescue Ground Team. Please respond." Static. But the rotors were definitely getting closer. Then I heard it, not one helicopter, but several. Military formation, heavy aircraft. Too heavy for rescue operations. The sound grew louder until the mountainside shook with rotor wash. Through the darkness, I saw lights sweeping the valleys below us. Searchlights. Brilliant white beams cutting through the forest canopy. But they weren't searching for survivors. They were herding something. "Oliver!" Lisa grabbed my arm. "What are they doing?" I watched through binoculars as the helicopters worked in coordinated patterns, their lights driving crowds of people toward what looked like a river valley. But something was wrong with the way those people moved. Even from this distance, their gait seemed off, stumbling, erratic. "All aircraft, this is Black Hawk 7, a voice crackled through military frequencies. "Infected population successfully corralled into designated containment zone. Requesting permission to proceed with sanitization protocol." Infected population. Sanitization protocol. The words made my blood run cold. Black Hawk 7, permission granted, clear the valley. What happened next will haunt me forever. The helicopters pulled back, and within minutes the entire valley erupted in flames. Napalm, probably. The orange glow lit up the mountainside like daylight, and the smell of burning reached us even at this elevation. Lisa was sobbing. Those were people down there. They were burning people. I couldn't answer her. Through the binoculars, I'd seen enough to understand what those people had become. The way they moved, the way they'd clustered together without any sense of self-preservation. Jake's broken radio transmission started making horrible sense. They're not people anymore. The fires burned for hours. By dawn, the entire valley was a smoking wasteland. The radio had gone completely silent. No more emergency broadcasts, no more military chatter. Just dead air. Lisa's condition deteriorated during the morning. Not physically. Her dehydration was under control. But mentally, she kept asking about her children, about when we'd go home. How could I tell her there might not be a home to go back to? Around 10 a.m., we heard it. A helicopter approaching from the southeast. Different engine signature, smaller aircraft. My hopes surged again until I got a clear look through the binoculars. The helicopter was barely flying. Smoke trailed from its engine, and it was losing altitude fast. As I watched, it clipped the tree line and went down hard about half a mile from our position. "We have to help them," Lisa said, struggling to stand. "You're staying here." I grabbed my medical kit and emergency supplies. "I'll investigate and come back for you." The crash site was worse than I'd expected. The helicopter had torn a scar through the forest, leaving a trail of wreckage and fuel. The cockpit was crushed, but I could see movement in the passenger compartment. I approached carefully, calling out, "This is Wilderness Rescue, can you hear me?" A weak voice responded, "Help, please." The passenger door was jammed, but I managed to pry it open with a tree branch. Inside, a woman in nurse scrubs was trapped under a piece of twisted metal. Her leg was obviously broken, and she'd lost a lot of blood. "Thank God," she gasped. I thought I was going to die here." "What happened? Where did you come from?" "University Hospital. It fell. Everyone's dead," or she shuddered. "We tried to evacuate the last patients. Helicopter got hit by something. Pilot didn't make it." I checked the cockpit. The pilot was definitely dead, but not from the crash. Something had torn his throat out. Bite marks covered his arms and neck. "How long have you been flying?" I asked, working to free her leg. "Since yesterday." We've been jumping from hospital to hospital, trying to find somewhere safe, but they're everywhere. The infected. They took Richmond, Norfolk, even the military bases. As I splinted her leg, she told me what she'd seen. Hospitals overrun in hours, medical staff turning on patients, military units wiping out entire city blocks trying to contain the spread. The infection moved faster than anyone had anticipated. It spreads through bites, she explained. But it's not just that. Anyone who dies comes back. Heart attack, car accident, doesn't matter. Within minutes, they're up and attacking. Anyone who dies comes back. That meant every casualty became a new threat. No wonder the containment had failed so quickly. There's something else, she whispered. The government's implementing something called Protocol 7. Complete sterilization of infected zones. They're going to bomb everything. I felt my stomach drop. When? 24 hours after the last successful communication. If they can't reach anyone in a designated zone, they assume it's lost and… She made a gesture across her throat. 24 hours, given what I'd heard on the radio. That deadline was approaching fast. I got her stabilized and fashioned a crude stretcher from helicopter seats and debris. The trek back to Lisa took over an hour, and by the time we arrived, my patient, Dr. Amanda Wilson, was in rough shape. Lisa helped me set up a proper triage area. Dr. Wilson's medical knowledge was invaluable, even injured. She confirmed what I'd suspected about Lisa's condition and helped me adjust her treatment. "We can't stay here," Dr. Wilson said as I recharged her IV. "If they implement Protocol 7, these mountains won't protect us. We need to find a way out of the blast zone." I studied our tactical maps. The blast zone would likely encompass everything within 50 miles of Richmond. We were maybe 40 miles out, too close for comfort. "There's a river about 2 miles north," I said. "Rapidan River. If we can reach it, we might be able to float downstream. Get outside the zone." 2 miles through infected territory? Lisa looked terrified. "Maybe not," Dr. Wilson said weakly. "The helicopters last night. They herded most of the infected into that valley. Burned them out. We might have a clear path." It was our only option. I spent the afternoon preparing for the move. Emergency supplies, medical equipment, improvised stretcher for Dr. Wilson. We'd leave at first light and hope to reach the river before any remaining infected found us. As night fell, I monitored the radio one last time. Nothing but static. Whatever was left of civilization had gone dark. "Oliver," Lisa said softly, "do you think my children…" I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Instead, I checked our supplies one more time and tried to plan for every contingency. We had one shot at this, and if Dr. Wilson was right about Protocol 7, we had less than 12 hours to get clear. At 5:30 a.m., I woke them both. The sky was just beginning to lighten, and the forest around us was dead silent. No bird calls, no animal sounds. Even the wind had died. Time to move. The trek to the river was a nightmare of difficult terrain and constant fear. Dr. Wilson, despite her injuries, proved tougher than expected. Lisa struggled with the pace, but adrenaline kept her moving. We made good time for the first mile. The burned valley had indeed cleared out most of the infected in our area. But as we approached the river, we started seeing signs that made my blood freeze. Fresh drag marks in the dirt, dark stains on tree bark. And then we found the first body, a park ranger, his uniform torn and bloody. But he wasn't dead. Not completely. As we approached, his head snapped up. His eyes were clouded white and dark fluid leaked from his mouth. A low moan escaped his throat as he tried to stand on legs that bent in impossible directions. "Zombie," Dr. Wilson whispered. "That's what they're calling them." The ranger lurched toward us, dragging his broken legs behind him. I grabbed a fallen branch and swung hard, catching him across the skull. The impact dropped him, but he kept moving, clawing at the ground. "Headshots," Dr. Wilson said urgently. "Only way to stop them completely." I brought the branch down again. Harder this time. The ranger went still. "Stay close," I whispered, leading them through dense undergrowth. There might be more. There were. As we got closer to the river, we started encountering them in groups. A family of hikers, their camping gear scattered around them. A group of teenagers who'd probably fled here from the city. All of them turned, all of them hunting. The worst part was the sounds they made. Not quite human, but not animal either. A constant low moaning punctuated by wet, guttural noises when they caught our scent. We tried to move quietly, but Lisa stepped on a branch that snapped like a gunshot. Every infected head in a 50-yard radius turned toward us. "Run," I said quietly, then louder, "Run!" They came at us from all directions. A businessman in a torn suit stumbled out from behind a tree, his briefcase still clutched in one hand. A jogger in bright athletic wear moved with jerky, unnatural steps. A child, maybe 10 years old, her school backpack still strapped to her shoulders. The child was the worst. She moved faster than the others, her small size allowing her to dart between the trees. Lisa screamed when she saw her. I swung my makeshift club at the businessman, catching him in the face. His nose caved in with a wet crunch, but he kept coming. His teeth snapped inches from my neck before I managed to cave in his skull completely. Dr. Wilson was on the ground, an infected jogger crawling on top of her. She held him back with her bare hands, his snapping teeth just inches from her face. I kicked him in the head hard enough to hear his neck snap. "Behind you!" Lisa screamed. I spun to see the infected child launching herself at my back. Instinct took over. I caught her in midair and slammed her into a tree. She hit with a sickening thud and didn't get back up. For a moment, the forest was quiet except for our ragged breathing. Then we heard more moaning in the distance. Our fight had attracted others. "The river!" Dr. Wilson gasped, struggling to stand. "We have to reach the river." Through the trees, I could see water. We were close, maybe 100 yards, but between us and safety, more infected were emerging from the forest. Dozens of them, drawn by the noise. We ran, crashing through undergrowth and fallen branches. Dr. Wilson's broken leg made her stumble, but adrenaline kept her moving. Behind us, the moaning grew louder as the infected gave chase. The riverbank appeared suddenly, a steep drop of about 10 feet to fast-moving water. I could see a small island in the middle of the current, maybe 50 yards downstream. "Jump!" I shouted. We hit the water hard. The current was ice-cold and incredibly strong, but it carried us away from the zombies gathering on the bank. They stood there, moaning and reaching toward us, but none of them entered the water. "They can't swim," Dr. Wilson gasped as we struggled toward the island. "Basic motor functions are too degraded." We dragged ourselves onto the island, gasping and shivering. It was small, maybe 50 yards long, covered with thick brush and fallen trees. But it was surrounded by fast-moving water that the infected couldn't cross. As we caught our breath, I saw vehicles approaching the riverbank through the trees. Cars and trucks moving fast, survivors fleeing toward the water. The first car was a family sedan. It skidded to a stop at the bank and 4 people piled out. A father, mother, and 2 young children. They saw us on the island and started waving frantically. "Help us!" the father shouted. "They're right behind us." I looked back toward the forest and felt my stomach drop. A massive crowd of infected was pouring through the trees, moving faster than any we'd encountered. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The bombing had driven every surviving zombie in the region toward the river. The family tried to enter the water, but the current was too strong for the children. The father held his son while the mother struggled with their daughter, but they were losing ground fast. The infected reached the riverbank and didn't hesitate. They plunged into the water, immediately swept away by the current. Most of them sank quickly, their decomposing bodies too heavy to float. But some drifted downstream, arms still reaching toward us even as they drowned. More vehicles arrived, pickup trucks, SUVs, even a school bus. Survivors poured out, all trying to reach the safety of the water, but most couldn't make it across. The current was too strong and the infected were too close. I watched in horror as a woman in nurse scrubs was pulled under just feet from shore. A group of teenagers made it halfway before being swept away. The zombies kept coming, an endless tide of rotting flesh and snapping teeth. The water around our island turned dark with blood and bodies. Infected floated past us, some still moving weakly as the current carried them downstream. Others had given up the fight, their reanimated corpses finally at rest. "They can't reach us," Dr. Wilson said, watching the carnage. "The water's too deep, current too fast, we're safe here." She was right. The island had become our sanctuary, protected by the very river that was destroying everything else. The infected could see us, could smell us, but they couldn't cross the barrier of fast-moving water. As the sun set on our first day on the island, we watched the last of the mainland survivors either make it to safety or disappear beneath the surface. The infected that remained on the shore eventually wandered off, drawn by sounds and scents from other directions. We were alone on our island, 3 survivors in a world gone mad. But we were alive, and for the first time since this nightmare began, we were truly safe. The jets came at dawn, implementing Protocol 7. We watched from our island as the bombs fell, turning the entire region into radioactive wasteland. The fire and radiation would finish what the water had started. No infected would survive the sterilization. But here on our island, surrounded by water and watched over by the ghosts of the dead, we had found something precious: hope.